Hey, what's up, guys? Getting a lot of good content out of this magazine. Real quick, Cabbage Patch Kids, the interlude vid. Wait till I get to the TV shows. But Cabbage Patch Kids, I remember these days, man. Look at these creepy little crackhead babies. I remember when these came out, right? I saw them originally. I forgot it was something on PBS, and they were explaining how these Cabbage Patch Kids, you would get a birth certificate with them, and essentially you were adopting these little pinhead babies, right? Um, and I remember the Christmas season. It was one of the first times I had ever seen people in the department stores like Kmart fighting for these things, for women, fighting and knocking each other down to grab these things for the little Gen X brats. Yeah, it was amazing. This little fad here. You remember Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield? Remember it was Thornton Mellon. The guy was talking to him about investing in some kind of dolls that were going to compete with the Cabbage Patch Kids. And he goes, our dolls, our kids, they're not adopted, they're abandoned. Remember? I I don't know why I thought that was funny, but it was a funny memory of these little bastards. Uh, I don't know. Okay, Thundercats. Now I was not a Thundercats fan. It was okay, but I wasn't a big fan. It was kind of simplistic, right? Of course, the animation, just like GI Joe, just like Transformers, just like Mask. The animation in hindsight now, it was obviously Japanese animation, but made for a Western audience and with Western writers, right? And so here they're talking about. Remember, this is a British magazine. I don't know what the anime scene or what the Japanese cartoon scene was in Britain. I don't think they had Robotech. They're mentioning Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers, but I don't know if those were shown there. Okay? But Thundercats apparently was. I've heard British people mentioning it. Right? Of course, the quality of animation was amazing, but the story lines were just right. Thundercats were the good guys. Mum Ra and the mutants were the bad guys. And I remember I used to always hate the mutants were such like easy enemies to defeat. Mum Ra was a little tougher, but I didn't really dig that. Of course, I'd rather see the actual Japanese animation where you had more nuance, where you had tougher opponents. Okay, although I will say for Transformers, the Decepticons were pretty tough. The Decepticons were they would put a hurting on the Autobots. Obviously, the movie they killed a bunch of them, but like I said, Thundercats or Silverhawks, which I barely remember. I just remember the bad guy's name was Monstar, right? Oh, very clever. I don't remember too much about it, you know. Anyway, this is sort of an interlude vid before we get to I guess now this thing here, I'm gonna make this a shorter vid. Go to the intro of it. A lot of these shows, 50 defining shows of the 80s. Remember, this is a British magazine, so a lot of these shows I'm not gonna remember. I've never seen. Although, like I said, as a New Yorker, we saw on the public TV, we saw a lot of British shows, probably more than the rest of you lot in the rest of America. In New York, of course, we were sort of like the first stop over from the UK. But some of these shows I wouldn't have known. It's very interesting to see that, yeah, the UK shows were a lot lower, right? Yeah, but we'll just read the intro here, right? Television in the 80s, producers became to reign supreme, right? Producers, right? You had, they're gonna mention that, like Stephen J. Cannell. He actually had he did a lot of good shows, produced a lot of good shows. And Michael Mann, of course, I believe Michael Mann, yeah, he did Miami Vice, right? Michael Mann did Manhunter, right? The first film with Hannibal in it, right? Brian Cox, the great Brian Cox. But getting back on here, right? Television in the 80s, producers began to reign supreme, punching out big hitting high concept shows, right? Right. And doing so, they provide entertaining distractions from the words the Cold War, right? The Cold War, while often reflecting the Reagan Thatcher era, which they were being made. Of course, here we didn't know who the hell was Thatcher, right? Stephen Bochco, who's swaggering chaotic Hill Street Blues. Yo, Hill Street Blues. That was one of the most mature shows I remember watching as a kid. Stephen Bochco, who also made the awesome Cop Rock, a show that everybody hated and that lasted one season. But yours truly, I really liked Cop Rock. I thought it was great. I thought it was great. Uh, so we go here. Dallas and Dynasty, a Dynasty, right? um, Cagney and Lacey. But if they were hugely glossy affairs, then the British were producing an antidote with more down to earth offers. Children were also treated to shows featuring memorable, charming puppets because you got no money, son. Short cartoons with catchy theme songs because you have no money. Short. I'm just joking, dude. I'm just joking, mates. Go ahead. Millions tuned in, right? For an era of fewer channels, right? Okay, this is a good thing to end this with. Fewer channels and alternatives. A lot of us didn't have cable. I didn't have cable where I lived till the early 90s, okay? For an era of fewer channels and alternatives, programs had to make an impact. And boy, did they, yes. I swear, there were less channels back then, and you had more things to watch, more content, more diversity, right? So anyway, so we're gonna get into the TV shows here. I want to go over what I can. Like I said, some of these I've never British shows that I would have never seen. Very local. Here we go. Oh, one last thing, one addendum to this vid, right? You see, right, shows that would be the talk of schools and workplaces the next day. This is another huge thing I had mentioned here. You had fewer channels, but you had a lot more content and diversity, right? But also the fact that you had in this time, you had more of a shared culture in the United States. Okay, everybody saw the last episode of MASH. Everybody saw, the Who Shot Jr. Everybody, the black, white, and everyone. Right? The it wasn't the culture wasn't as segregated. We all watched a lot of the same shows, listened to the same radios, saw the same movies. Okay, you didn't have now where like literally everything is sort of atomized, or there's just one whatever they show on TV is what everybody's watching, which more than half the country is not watching at this point. Right? But yeah, there was a shared thing. Even if we were at each other's throats, we all knew we had a common shared culture. Okay, even if it was this garbage culture, of the time, which is now like literally high art compared to today. But we all would know if we were talking about things. We would know what we were talking about. We would understand. Okay, in a lot of ways, yours truly was at the end of this decade was going like into the subcultures. So I guess I was trying to get away from the mainstream, even though the mainstream was a lot better back then. But anyway, the whole point of just adding this was that, yeah, everybody knew this stuff. It was a cultural thing. You could talk to people, they knew what you were talking about, at least on the primetime major networks. Okay. And that showed you by the end of the 90s, 2000s, that was lost. So, in the 90s, Seinfeld, Friends, two of the worst shows that everybody loved, everybody talks about, and that I will always eviscerate. But back in the 80s, man, you had good stuff that we all shared and we all knew. So yeah, say goodbye.